Hey everyone, I thought this evening it'd be fun to talk about the 9 different strangers that everyone meets when they start a company. You know, whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you're interested to find out who these 9 strangers are, or if you're already knee deep in starting a business and you've met 5 of these strangers and you may have yet to meet 4 of them. I think it's pretty interesting to talk about who these people are, because I feel like as an entrepreneur or a business owner, everyone meets these strangers, so to speak. So today maybe I'll speak to the 9 strangers that I met within my startup career, and I'll kind of give them names, like not their actual names, but I guess titles, and you can see whom you've met that may be similar, or if you haven't met them, maybe it's just a bit of a canary in the coal mine or a little bit of advice on how to deal with these people. And some are good, some are debatably bad, but it's all part of the experience, right? And if this is the first time we're speaking through the power of, I guess, digital videos and stuff like that, my name's Tashi. I call myself the failed founder because over a 6-year period, almost 10 years ago, I built a business with my business partner at the time. We hit a $10 million valuation, and that business was around turning restaurants that were closed during the day into a network of co-working spaces, and we scaled across Australasia. But we messed up in the sixth innings, I guess, the 6th year. Yeah, but we took a lot of learnings from that entire startup journey, and I've translated that into a corporate career today. So if you're interested about any of that stuff, I filmed some videos exploring, what skills translate well and what's it like to kind of be a corporate exec now after being an entrepreneur for quite some time. But today, as part of my journey, I suppose, I'll talk to each stranger type and how that translated to what happened when I started to all the way finished, and see if that's helpful. So the first stranger, and this is what happens when you start the business, you've got the idea, we'll call the co-founder, and I was very lucky meeting my co-founder because I actually met my co-founder many years before we had the idea of Two Space. That's what the company was called. We worked together on rainforest protection businesses over in Southeast Asia. He was always a technician and I was always the relationship manager or the business development guy, I suppose. So when we actually had the idea together, and funnily enough, it was in a restaurant, we had the idea of, hey, we're having a business meeting here. How cool would it be if these restaurants that were closed during the day, were used for business spaces because, they're being underutilized, someone's paying rent the full time, and yada, 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 right? And the idea just stuck. So that was the first stranger. Not so stranger, but stranger. And it's important for you, even if you're not, I guess, you don't have the history of someone to do that. My advice here is don't rush into marrying this stranger, because a co-founder is a real commitment. A lot of ideas, especially if they're good ones, or not just good ones, but executed really well, that could be a very long relationship, right? So you don't want to rush into it. And you don't necessarily just want to find someone like-minded who you get along with really well. I think this person needs to complement your skill set. So whatever you're lacking, whatever gap you have, hopefully find someone who fills that gap. And then eventually when you think about your product or your business, think about all of the skills that you would need to be successful, even short term. Like think of only like a 24-month runway, right? Because the market and your product's going to change in 3 years. So don't even think that far ahead, especially as an entrepreneur just starting out. And think about how to fill that. So you may not need a developer straight away. You might actually need a marketing person, or you might need a community-driven person who knows how to build communities and all that kind of stuff. You might need a salesperson. I think that's what you need to figure out. So that's the first stranger, the co-founder. The second stranger, the perfect stranger, so to speak, is the early adopter, right? Think of this as either your first customer or your first service provider partner in order for you to deliver your product offering. And in our case, because we were a business that started, co-working spaces out of restaurants, our first adopter was the first venue that decided to give us a shot, right? And that was a very long, laborious process. It took It took almost a year to find our first adopter. Like we had the idea, we had the co-founder, we even flirted with the idea with wait lists and in Facebook groups and all that kind of stuff. And we drummed up a lot of interest. But the first adopter was tough, man. Like when you think about the concept of turning, restaurants into co-working spaces, and I was going to be like, oh, this has never been done before. Who are you? What happens if someone trips and falls? What happens if someone burns the restaurant down? All this kind of stuff. And the short answer to that is like, I don't know, like when you're starting out. But we found eventually, these two dudes who are just looking for different ways to innovate their own business and look at different ways of cash flow that said yes and gave us the shot. So they were our early adopter. And it was incredible because, we probably got rejected hundreds and hundreds of times. And I remember like knocking in the rain, trying to find our first adopter in all the restaurants because there's no point calling, right? Because they're busy setting up for the restaurant trade or they're closed. So the best time to get them was like the hour before they opened because the owner was there being frantic and you literally had like 10 seconds to get your idea across the line. So you're hyper fast elevator pitch because they're busy trying to run their business, man. And who are you, right? And I won't get into the elevator pitch, but my only advice there, if you're trying to craft one, is craft one that you are confident you can pitch to your grandparents or to a 10-year-old kid. No fancy words, no buzzwords, short and sweet. Because if the elevator pitch is good and you can do it in a sentence or two, the other person will ask you more about it. And then it's no longer a pitch, is it? It's a discussion. So not to go off on a tangent, but elevator pitches are always great fun. So the early adopter is the second perfect stranger. The third one, and you could be the stranger yourself, I call the copycat, right? So, and by saying that, you could be one yourself, you may actually be copying an idea you've seen in another market. And there's nothing wrong with that because, maybe it's a great idea that needs to be introduced into your country, your city, or your market that's not being delivered very well overseas, right? Because I see a lot of entrepreneurs not starting because they think they're not first to market or first to the idea and they stop. But first is not always everything, right? And the copycat could be someone else. It could be someone who's already doing your idea when you're trying to deliver it, and you're not going to copy them, but you think they're doing it, right? Because you always get asked by, if you go down the investment route or you're trying to pitch your idea to someone, they're like, oh, who's your competitors, who's doing it, and all that kind of stuff. So you almost create this fictitious and scary list of copycats, right? That half the time don't exist. And also, the one thing I'd say about copycats is don't worry about them. If you're starting this business because you're passionate or driven to solve a problem, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So you shouldn't think about which copycat or which competitor is going to win the 100-meter dash. You need to just think about your own race because half the time they all drop off, right? And you can almost Stephen Bradbury it, which is an Australian reference. If you get it, great. If you don't worry about it. But you could be the last one standing, right, in a really positive way. The fourth perfect stranger could be a group of strangers, but I'm going to call them the groupies, right? The startup groupies. And some are great and some are questionable. So by groupies, I kind of mean like not in the true sense of the word, but like there's a lot of startup communities out there that love talking about it, love networking. They're the same people or new people and they support one another. So there's a lot of really good stuff that comes out of it, like, camaraderie and all that kind of stuff, because it can be very lonely starting a business. But I think there's also a lot of negative stuff that comes out of it. I feel like starting a business is romanticized and sensationalized, and a lot of people just do it because they think it's cool, or because their friends do it, or because they see a TikTok video or Instagram reel or YouTube short or whatever saying, start your business, stuff the man, you can do it. And they think it's cool. I can tell you right now, it's not cool. I can tell you right now, a lot of people, successful entrepreneurs, if you ask them, hey, if you could go back in time and start again with all the knowledge that you had today so you could do it 10 times better, would you do it? And they would all say no, right? Because we had no idea how hard it was when we started. We just did it because we were foolish to a degree, right? But now that we know how hard it is, it's really hard to think back, even if you could do it better, do I really want to put myself through it? So that's kind of why I put that category of perfect stranger in this on the fence, because it's great, but also they're the ones that are going to push you and sometimes like boast, oh, I'm so tired, I haven't slept, I work so hard, or I'm like broke, but I love it. And I don't know why they get off on that stuff because I never did. But you can kind of get caught on that train in a bad way. And they also promote growth way too much, I think. Like from a startup perspective, you shouldn't be chasing growth. You shouldn't be chasing, how do I scale? How do I get funding? Which again is romanticized because you also see all the big companies like Uber and all of these massive technology plays that cared more about funding and growth than actually generating a profit. I think that teaches you the wrong thing, especially as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be trying to figure out how do you become profitable, how do you generate margin, and then grow that way. It's not a race. And this is where it kind of, and I'm sorry I'm going on a rant, but this is where it gets a bit sticky and a bit yuck for me. Why are you chasing growth? Why are you chasing scaling quickly, right? Because that is the formula, which is an art, not a science, to get a higher company valuation. Why are you chasing a higher company valuation? Because you want to raise more money, because that way you can give away 5% or 10% of your company for $1 million or something like that. But why would you care about all of that stuff if you've built a business that is profitable, has margin, you can grow at your own rate as long as it's the strategic right route, because you're going to bootstrap it or you don't need the money. Then you can grow at your own leisure as long as you're remaining competitive in the market. So when you think about it that way, and you don't need to chase growth because you're going to ask for money, then you won't get unstuck. Because once you try and grow too quickly, I think you make a lot of mistakes. The fifth perfect stranger is the bigwigs. I'll call it the bigwigs. And for me, I'll give you an example. So there were two bigwigs within our startup journey very early on. The first was Optus, which is a telco company within Australia. They were our first bigwig because in order for us to deliver co-working spaces within these restaurants, we needed really good Wi-Fi. We couldn't just use the internet connection within the restaurant or the hotel or whatnot. So Optus was the first one to believe in us and go, here you go, kiddo. Back then, here's your Wi-Fi. And they wouldn't charge us at all. They'd give it to us for free because at the time they had an incubator or a innovation lab called Yes Lab. And they wanted us to succeed and they gave us the internet, right? So without that support, we wouldn't have even gotten our first location or the first early adopter, the second perfect stranger, because we needed that internet play. And actually the way we got the early adopter was kind of being a bit cheeky and saying we've got Optus as a partner or as a bigwig before we even had Optus. So it's kind of like this weird, gray area, chicken egg play, but it worked out in the end. So Optus was our first bigwig and we owe them a lot because they were believed in us as an early stage business. The second bigwig for us was another, a big unicorn of a company called Atlassian, in software and they've eclipsed $1 billion valuation. They're heroes within the Australian startup ecosystem. They were our second bigwig because they were one of our first big corporate clients as a startup. And as you can appreciate as a small business, if you can slap that brand on and say, hey, this is one of our key customers, it does really well for your own brand because people trust you, right? And we also learned a lot from them because there were tons of leaders and executives within that business that were way smarter than us. And the relationship started because they actually wanted to use our spaces for their quarterly exec meetings. And we learned from that because the reason they booked us, even though they had dope offices everywhere, was they believed in the 10 people rule, which is if you've got 10 people and you send them into one room to solve an idea, you'll get one idea. But if you split them into 3 groups of 3 or 4 and send them into 3 different locations, like a boardroom, a rooftop, a beach, or whatever, a library, different spaces to inspire different thinking, you'll get 3 ideas. So that's why they used us, because we had all these really cool restaurant co-working locations. And learning that, we actually leveraged that to go target more corporates, which was a big reason for our growth. So that is the fifth perfect stranger, the bigwigs. Now, to take a bit of a negative spin, the sixth perfect stranger that everyone will meet at some point, I call the wolf in sheep's clothing, or the wolves in sheep's clothing. Now, these individuals don't mean to be, and you might find yourself becoming one or being one without meaning to, because we all go through these character development style journeys and explorations and stuff like that. But you'll find some, founding members or people that you work very early on demonstrate their true colors when things get hard, because everything's great and rosy when it's the first or second year. When it's a great idea, you're making some money, you've got some growth, you may have raised some money, if you've gone down that route instead of bootstrapping, and everyone's kind of getting paid, or even if they're not, they don't mind being 2 years in with sweat equity because they know, oh, I'll get my shares and all that kind of stuff. But when you enter the third or fourth or even fifth year and you're still trying to figure it out, this is where it can get messy. So, and maybe that's a bit of an unfair categorization of this stranger, because, you know, they may not know that they're a wolf and they're in that sheep's clothing. But the reason I put it in there is mainly not to judge anyone, but to share with you, everyone goes through it. So when it happens to you, don't feel alone, don't feel shitty, don't blame yourself, don't feel like, could I have done this differently, or could I have dealt with this person differently? Everyone goes through it. It's just part of life, right? At the end of the day, when you start a business, it's like almost a life decision, right? Because it's going to be there for a very long time if you stick it out. So just like every other aspect in your personal, your family, and whatever life, you're going to find, you know, occurrences like this. So don't worry about it too much. Now, the seventh perfect stranger, I just need a quick sip of coffee if that's all right. Talking too much with no editing. And I don't know if you can hear the rain right now, actually. Hopefully that doesn't come out too heavy, but it's pissing rain in Sydney, Australia right now, which is why I've got the fire on, wrong side, behind me. The seventh perfect stranger I'll call the opportunists. And, you know, these are the individuals, whether they're partners, whether they're part of communities, whether they're people that you know, when they think you're onto something and you're getting some traction, they will be your best friend. They'll be everywhere. They'll want a piece of your company. They'll want to advise you. They will want to help with your strategy. They'll do a lot of things to kind of get in bed with you. And I call them the opportunists because you'll actually develop really good relationships with them. And it sucks because when things go south, you know, just as quick as they came, they'll be gone. They'll move on to the next cool founder or the cool idea. And just be prepared for that, man or woman or whatever. I'm just using ad-lib language here. It's kind of like, yeah, it sucks. Because I thought I had a lot of really good friends when I was running my business back in the day. But yeah, that wasn't the case. So it just sucks. It sucks even today. And this was like over 10 years ago, right? I don't even know why I'm getting upset about it. But like, there were people that, you know, I trusted, I listened to, were much wiser, I looked up to, and dropped me like a bad habit as soon as things didn't go my way, or I decided that I didn't want to do it anymore because I burnt out. And honestly, like the big reason for burning out is you know, I just cared way too much about this business and startup. I didn't care enough about my own health and my own sanity, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. But anyway, so that stranger, I just, you know, unfortunately goes from stranger to friend, back to stranger. And I guess it's a perfect stranger in that regard if you know that you're going to meet those people, but just be ready. And you're probably way stronger than I am, so you won't give a shit. You'll just brush it off. But for me, it really sucked. To the point where today I'm even a bit careful about opening up from a friendship perspective when it comes to business, even as a corporate executive now, right? Because you're only as hot as the deals that you're doing, it feels like most of the time. Now, to take more of a positive spin, the eighth perfect stranger is the unexpected advisor and also friend. We found that throughout our journey, delivering our business, right, we partnered with a lot of hotel groups because at the start, restaurants made sense because also it was a sexy story. But as we scaled, when a restaurant's closed during the day, you need to staff it, right? Or you need to rely on the restaurateur putting some staff on, and that's an operating cost. Whereas when we pivoted to hotels, that was great because we could upskill and train all of the hotel staff, right? And because of that, we started talking to a lot of huge hotel groups. And this was kind of when our valuation went really high, because we were no longer targeting small restaurants or even small restaurant groups. We were looking at hotel groups who had staff that could learn about our offering that we could leverage as on-site staff to reduce our OPEX and increase our margin, right? And then it was more of a technology play for us. We cared more about how many users do we have? How can we connect them? Yes, we'll share the revenue with the venues, but from a hotel perspective, they cared about the activation of their space, right? Because when you think about it, a hotel could be 100% occupied from a room's perspective, but if they're not down using the communal areas, the restaurant, working in the spaces and all that kind of stuff as a co-working space, might as well just be a ghost town of a hotel. So we actually met some really cool people, one in particular that heard our story, we pitched to, and then they were like, you know what, I want to continue talking to you even though this deal didn't go through. And he ended up turning into an advisor of the business who we actually gave equity to just for his advice, you know, for him to be someone who was much older than us at the time that could introduce us to people, but also help challenge us. Like, what about this? What about that? You know, which was really important. And also very important to the first perfect stranger, your co-founder. Because for me, like, I have a shit ton of ideas all the time, but they all suck, right? I wouldn't say they all suck. I'd say like I have 100 ideas and 99 of them suck, but one's really good. But you need someone to tell you those 99 suck, right? In order to move ahead. And I guess I'll close this because this is probably getting a bit long and no one's going to watch this to the end. But the last one, and this is my favorite, right? My favorite perfect stranger, I call your rock, right? This is someone, whether you meet them on your journey or you've met them at the start or their family or they're a friend, someone that you can really count on, or you will count on, or you'll almost be your pseudo therapist. You'll talk to them about it. They'll help you through it. They'll give you advice. Someone you can really, feel good about knowing what you're going through. You knowing that they know what you're going through means a lot to you. And this person I met throughout my journey. So it wasn't someone that I already knew. It wasn't a family member. It was one of our first members, I guess. So early adopters in a different way from a customer perspective. And, to share a really happy story from that time. And probably my biggest success from starting my business is that rock, that perfect stranger is now my wife. We're happily married. We've got a family. This is our beautiful house, and we've got the fire behind it. Oh, fucking wrong way. Fire behind us. And, honestly, if I had to look back, I picked up a lot of skills on my startup journey, which I've translated into my corporate career, and it's all working. But my biggest success is meeting her. I think she really makes me a better person. So those are my 9 perfect strangers. I'm not saying that you're going to meet the same exact 9 people, but hopefully that little storytelling time with the fire and the coffee and stuff tonight was helpful and entertaining. And I guess the only thing I'll say to close this off is if you're thinking of starting something and you really want to do it, the first green flag is that you can't stop thinking about it and you really want to do it, because it's going to take that level of drive and obsession to a degree to push through all the mud, right? Or to push through these strangers as well. So good luck to you. You got this. And I look forward to chatting to you again soon.